The chandelier above glittered like frozen fireworks, scattering shards of light across gowns worth more than some people's homes. Champagne flutes clinked, laughter rippled, and cameras flashed as the charity gala unfolded in perfect polished rhythm. And there I was, standing at the edge of the ballroom, heart hammering. Except it wasn't me who was supposed to be there. It was my sister. My family made sure of that. She floated across the marble floor in the gown I had picked, the invitation I had earned, smiling that perfect, rehearsed smile. Reporters swarmed her, calling her name as though she were the chosen one. My mother's lips curled into that smug, familiar smirk, the one she wore whenever she believed she had finally erased me. They thought they had outmaneuvered me, that I'd watch from the shadows, humiliated, powerless, forgotten. But as I stood there, hidden in plain sight, I knew something they didn't. This wasn't their triumph. It was the opening scene of their downfall. By the time I was old enough to count the cracks in our living room ceiling, I had already learned the unspoken rule in my family. My sister was the crown jewel, and I was the rough stone left in the dirt. She was delicate, charming, a natural performer who thrived under attention. I was quiet, steady, the one who held things together when the lights went out or the bills piled too high. If something needed fixing, I fixed it. If someone needed covering, I covered. My sister sparkled, and I became the backdrop against which she shone brighter. At school, I worked shifts after class to help pay for supplies. At home, I cooked dinners, folded laundry, patched holes in leaky pipes. My parents barely noticed, unless something went wrong. Then their eyes would turn sharp, their voices quick to remind me how clumsy, how ungrateful, how invisible I should feel. The favoritism wasn't subtle. My sister had a bedroom painted twice before she was 12, curtains that matched her dresses, and trips to summer camps where she collected friends like seashells. I had hand-me-down furniture and a quiet corner where I kept a shoebox filled with crumpled pay stubs and coins. It wasn't much, but it was mine. A piggy bank for dreams no one else believed I could afford. That shoebox became my symbol of survival. Every dollar I folded into it whispered that I mattered, even if no one else admitted it. My parents loved displaying her trophies on the mantel, dance recitals, beauty pageants, debate ribbons. They polished them like they were extensions of themselves. My achievements never made the cut. When I graduated with honors, the certificate ended up shoved into a drawer. When I won a small scholarship, they brushed it off, saying it wasn't enough to make a difference. Still, I carried on. Peace, not glory, was what I wanted. But peace wasn't what they allowed me. The first sting, the humiliation that still burns, came on my 18th birthday. I had saved for months to buy a simple white dress, one I could wear for interviews, maybe even a future job. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a piece of independence I had carved out for myself. I came home from work one night to find my sister twirling in front of the mirror, wearing my dress. The tags were ripped off, the fabric stretched slightly at the seams from her dancing. My mother stood nearby, clapping as though it were a runway show. "Doesn't she look perfect?" My mother beamed. My throat closed up. That was mine. I bought it. My mother's eyes flicked to me with that cold glint. "Oh, don't be selfish. She wears it better anyway. You wouldn't want it wasted, would you?" The laughter that followed felt like glass breaking under my skin. I swallowed hard, said nothing, and walked away. That night, as I sat cross-legged on my floor, staring at my empty shoebox, I made a silent promise to myself. If they wanted me invisible, I would let them think I was. But invisibility is not weakness. It's patience. It's strategy. Because one day, the world would see what they had tried so hard to bury. And that day was coming sooner than any of us knew. After the white dress incident, I thought I'd grown numb. But numbness is a lie. It's just pain waiting for another opening, and my family knew exactly how to pry the wounds wider. It started with whispers at family gatherings. My mother would lean in close to an aunt, her voice pitched just high enough for me to overhear. "She means well, but she's so awkward." Employers can sense that. It's why she never quite gets anywhere. Or my father, chuckling with a neighbor while I carried trays of food to the table. "She's the hardworking one, sure. But brains? Ambition?" Those went to her sister. Some people are meant to stay in the background. Their words clung to me like smoke, filling my lungs, making it harder to breathe. Then came the small sabotages. My applications went missing from the mail pile. Job interview times were accidentally miscommunicated. My sister, with her ever-sweet smile, would tell me she had borrowed my notes, my jacket, even the references I worked hard to earn. And still, I swallowed it down. My strategy was endurance. If I kept my head low, worked harder, saved more, I believed life would eventually reward persistence. But persistence has limits when the ground beneath you keeps shifting. The toll began to show. Sleepless nights left shadows under my eyes. My body ached with tension, my chest tight, my stomach often twisted in knots I couldn't untangle. I'd lie awake, listening to the refrigerator hum, counting seconds on the clock, wondering how much longer I could last in a house that seemed built on erasing me. It wasn't just home, either. My mother carried her favoritism into the community like a badge of honor. At church fundraisers, she paraded my sister as though she were royalty while I stood in the back stacking chairs. At neighborhood events, she introduced me as the helper, but my sister as our star. The isolation spread. People believed her version of me, plain, shy, not worth more than errands and odd jobs. And when enough voices repeat a lie, even your own begins to question whether it's true. I was close to giving in, to accepting invisibility as my fate, when the unexpected happened. It was a Tuesday afternoon, humid and heavy, the kind of day where sweat sticks to your back even in the shade. I had walked to the library, one of the only places that felt safe. Among the smell of paper and dust, I could almost hear myself think. That day, I dropped a folder of resumes I'd been clutching, papers scattered across the floor. As I scrambled to gather them, a hand reached down to help. "Yours?" a calm voice asked. I looked up to see a man in a simple button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows. He wasn't polished like the Gala crowd. His hands were rough, like someone used to real work. "Yeah," I mumbled, embarrassed. He handed me the stack, pausing to glance at the cover page. "You're applying for admin jobs?" "Finance assistant?" Heat rose in my face. "I'm trying. Just need someone to give me a chance." He studied me for a moment, not with pity, but with something sharper. Recognition. "You're better than the paper makes you look," he said. "Don't let them convince you otherwise." It was a small sentence, a stranger's kindness, but it cracked something open inside me. For the first time in years, I felt the faintest flicker of oxygen. That night, lying awake again, my chest felt different. Not lighter, not yet, but steadier. Because someone, even just one person, had seen me without the distortion of my family's shadow. And that was the first time I realized I wasn't entirely alone. The weeks that followed that library encounter brought small shifts. I started carrying myself differently, even if just by a fraction. I kept applying for jobs, saving every cent, keeping careful records in a binder I hid beneath my mattress. It wasn't rebellion yet, but it was preparation. My family noticed the change, and they didn't like it. One evening, I came home to find my father sitting at the kitchen table with an envelope. My sister hovered nearby, arms folded, smirking like a cat with cream. "What's this?" I asked, setting down my bag. My father slid the envelope across the table. Inside was a letter, from a local firm I had applied to. Except it wasn't sealed. It was already opened. "You really think you're qualified for this?" My mother's voice sliced from behind me. "An assistant in finance? They'd laugh you out of the office. You don't belong there." Heat climbed up my neck. That was my mail. My father leaned back, satisfied. "We're your parents. We have a right to know when you're wasting time. You should focus on helping at home. Your sister is the one who's going places." The humiliation pressed down on me, familiar, yet heavier this time. They weren't just mocking me. They were intercepting opportunities, tightening the walls. And then came the real blow. A week later, I was summoned to the living room. My parents sat like judges. My sister sprawled across the couch like royalty. On the coffee table lay a stack of papers, bills, bank statements, even my meager savings slips. "We've decided," my mother announced, "that your finances need oversight. You're not responsible enough. We'll be managing your money from now on." My breath caught. They had gone through my things, through the shoebox, through my binder. my private lifeline, stripped bare. "You can't do that," I said, voice trembling, but louder than usual. "Of course we can," my father replied. "You're under our roof. Our rules. You should be grateful we're keeping you from making foolish choices." Something inside me cracked. Not like glass breaking, but like ice splitting in spring. For the first time, I didn't just absorb the blow. I pushed back. "No," I said firmly. "That money is mine. I earned every dollar. You don't touch it." Silence dropped like a curtain. My mother's face twisted with fury. My sister snorted a laugh, muttering, "You'll regret that." And maybe I should have, because the very next day a letter arrived, this time sealed, but slid across the table by my mother as though she were delivering bad news she delighted in. It was from the local court, a summons. My parents had filed a claim against me, arguing that I owed them household debts, and that they had the right to seize my savings. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. They were actually dragging me into a legal fight. I sat frozen in my room that night, the papers spread across my bed, my pulse pounding like a war drum. They had money. They had influence. I had nothing, except a binder of receipts, pay stubs, and dates carefully logged over the last 2 years. That binder became my shield. Every shift I had worked, every cent I had tucked away, it was all there, proof that what I had was mine. I contacted the library stranger. His name was Daniel, I'd learned by then. Hesitant, but desperate. He wasn't a lawyer, but he had connections. He helped me find someone willing to represent me at little cost, someone who believed in standing up against bullying families. The first hearing was brutal. My parents strutted in with confidence, my sister whispering smugly in the front row. They expected the judge to dismiss me as a foolish child. But when I laid that binder on the desk, organized, precise, undeniable, their faces shifted. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's smirk faltered. They thought they still had control. They didn't. And that was the first crack in their empire. If my parents were rattled by the binder, they didn't show it for long. The very next week, they regrouped. And when my family regrouped, it meant war. Rumors began to spread, almost overnight. At church, I overheard whispers that I was ungrateful, that I refused to support the family that raised me. At the grocery store, a neighbor clucked her tongue and said, "Such a shame. You'd think she'd show more respect to her parents." My sister fueled it all with sweetly sharpened lies. "She's been unstable," I overheard her telling one of my old teachers at a community fundraiser. "It's why she lashes out. We're trying so hard to help her." The teacher glanced at me with pity, the kind that burns worse than scorn. It was a smear campaign, and it worked. Friends drifted. Calls stopped coming. Invitations never reached my door. For a while, I felt the old weight pressing me down again. The insomnia returned, nights spent staring at the ceiling, pulse racing with dread. But then I'd roll over, open my binder, and remind myself, I had proof. I had truth. I wasn't powerless anymore. And slowly, my mindset shifted. I began keeping records of everything, not just my pay stubs, but every cruel word, every sabotaged application, every rumor I could trace back to them. I kept screenshots, receipts, written logs with dates and times. My binder grew thicker, heavier, transforming from a shield into a weapon. I also found allies in unlikely places. Daniel introduced me to a support group, people who had faced controlling families, toxic bosses, manipulative spouses. Their stories mirrored mine in different shapes. And for the first time, I wasn't alone in the battlefield. Therapy followed. At first, I resisted. Part of me still believed I was too broken, too invisible for help to matter. But slowly, sessions gave me clarity. I learned to name what my family had done: gaslighting, financial abuse, coercion. Naming it didn't erase the scars, but it gave me language to fight back. Meanwhile, my family tightened their grip on appearances. They couldn't admit, publicly, that I was slipping from their control. So they doubled down on painting me as the villain. My sister posted pictures online in gowns I had picked for myself, writing captions about her supportive family. My mother shared glowing stories of her star daughter, with pointed jabs about how not everyone appreciates family values. The irony was bitter. They spent so much energy crafting lies that cracks began to show. My father grew short-tempered, snapping at neighbors when questions got too pointed. My sister's flawless mask slipped when she thought no one was watching, her smile fading, her jaw tight. And through it all, my binder sat on my desk, now accompanied by a small object I kept close, the shoebox. I had taped its edges, reinforced its corners. Each time I dropped another bill inside, I felt stronger. That box was no longer just survival, it was evidence of my independence, a symbol of my refusal to disappear. I knew the reckoning was coming. I could feel it like storm air, heavy and charged. My family had always relied on shadows and silence, but I was done being quiet. The day it arrived wasn't dramatic at first, just a simple envelope in the mail, cream paper, embossed lettering, an invitation to the annual charity gala, the one my parents prized above all else. I knew instantly, this was it, the arena, the stage where their empire of lies would finally collide with the truth I had been building. I set the invitation down, fingers trembling, not from fear, but from anticipation. The day of reckoning was coming, and no one, not even them, could stop it. The night of the gala arrived wrapped in gold and glass. Spotlights swept across the city skyline, catching the glitter of arriving limousines. The air smelled of perfume, champagne, and the faint metallic tang of anticipation. For my parents, this was their throne room. For me, it was a battlefield. I stood at the edge of the ballroom, dressed simply but sharply. Black suit, hair pinned back, binder tucked into a sleek portfolio at my side. My invitation had been delivered directly to me, and for once, they couldn't stop me from walking through the doors. Across the room, my sister sparkled in silver sequins, basking in camera flashes. My mother hovered beside her, her smug smile sharp as glass. My father shook hands with donors, his laughter too loud, too confident. They hadn't noticed me yet. The night unfurled with speeches, auctions, and polite applause. I waited, heart steady, until the MC announced the highlight of the evening, recognition for the rising young talent of our community. My sister's name echoed through the speakers. She rose gracefully, gown glittering like liquid mercury, and made her way to the stage. Applause thundered. My parents beamed, faces glowing with victory, and that's when I stepped forward. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. Calm, steady, reflective. The room shifted, murmurs rising like wind through tall grass. The MC faltered, eyes darting between me and my sister. My parents froze, color draining from their faces. I walked to the stage, each step deliberate. My heels clicked against marble, echoing louder than the applause that had already faded. When I reached the podium, I placed my portfolio down and opened it with quiet precision. "This honor," I began, my voice carrying through the microphone, "is meant to recognize contribution, sacrifice, work that uplifts others. But what happens when those contributions are stolen? When sacrifices are erased?" Gasps rippled, cameras tilted toward me. My sister's smile faltered, her hands trembling around the award she hadn't yet received. I lifted the first page from my binder, a photograph of receipts, pay stubs, the evidence of years of labor dismissed and denied. Then another, applications lost in the mail, dates of interviews I was told were wrong. And then the shoebox, small, battered, but undeniable, set on the podium beside the papers. "This," I said, touching it gently, "is what they tried to take. Every hour I worked, every dollar I saved. Proof that I existed, that I built something with my own hands, even when they told me I was nothing." The room was silent now, the kind of silence that swallows breath. My mother's face twisted, her mouth opening to object, but I raised a hand. Calm, steady, authority in every syllable. "For years they told you she was the star." I gestured toward my sister. "And I was the shadow. But shadows only exist because something is blocking the light. Tonight, I'm done standing behind them." I turned to the audience, to the cameras, to every pair of eyes locked on me. "I don't want apologies. I want change. And it starts with truth." The last word hung in the air like a bell tolling midnight. My sister's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the unclaimed award. My father's jaw clenched, his face pale. My mother, always so perfectly composed, looked as if her mask had shattered, shards of fury and panic flickering across her expression. And the crowd? Oh, the crowd. Some stared in shock, some in sympathy, some in admiration. But no one looked at my family the same way again. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. And for the first time, they couldn't hide. The silence after my words felt endless, like the world itself had stopped to inhale. Then slowly, the applause began. Not for my sister, not for the performance my parents had orchestrated, but for me. It started with a few tentative claps from the back of the room. Then more joined. Within seconds, the entire hall thundered with it. Cheers, shouts, the kind of applause that felt less like politeness and more like a collective breaking of chains. My mother sat frozen, eyes wide, lips trembling as though she couldn't comprehend the sound. My father gripped the arm of his chair so hard his knuckles whitened. My sister stared down at the award in her hands, then slowly set it back on the table, her shoulders collapsing inward as if the sequins on her gown suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. That night didn't end with a dramatic ejection, no security escorting them out. It ended with something quieter, crueler to them. The turning of heads, the whispers of donors, the sudden loss of respect. Their empire of image began to crumble, not with an explosion, but with the steady erosion of trust. The fallout came swiftly. Invitations stopped arriving at their door, sponsors withdrew support. My sister's social media posts, once filled with adoration, turned sour, comments questioning her borrowed shine. My parents, once the center of every event, found themselves standing at the edges, their smug smiles brittle, their names whispered with pity instead of admiration. For me, life didn't transform overnight into glitter and ease, but it shifted, decisively, irrevocably. I moved out within weeks, carrying little more than clothes, my portfolio, and the shoebox. Daniel helped me find a small apartment, barely 2 rooms, but it was mine. No one rifled through my things, no one sneered at my dreams. I framed the deed to that apartment, modest though it was, above my desk. And beside it, I placed the shoebox, now sturdier, taped edges replaced by a polished wooden lid I bought secondhand. Inside, I kept not just money, but symbols. My first apartment key, a letter of employment from a firm that finally gave me a chance, even the program from the Gala, where I had stood tall for the first time. Each item whispered the same truth. I existed. I mattered. My family tried, of course, to reel me back in. My mother called with a voice sticky sweet, pretending none of it had happened. My father sent clipped messages about family duty. My sister once showed up at my door, eyes ringed with sleeplessness, muttering about how I had ruined everything. I listened, and then I closed the door. Closure didn't come from revenge. It came from boundaries, from walking away without the weight of proving myself anymore. I built new connections, friends who valued me for my presence, not my usefulness. A chosen family who celebrated small victories with me. A new job title, a repaired sink, even a laugh-filled dinner in my tiny kitchen. And slowly, the scars began to heal. Sometimes, I would look back, at the white dress that was taken, the nights spent invisible, the courtroom summons that nearly broke me. And I realized, those weren't just wounds. They were stepping stones. The girl who once sat cross-legged on her floor, staring at an empty shoebox, had become the woman who filled it, not just with money, but with proof of her worth. And though my parents' empire crumbled around them, though my sister's crown dulled, I found something brighter than their approval. Peace. As I stood by the window of my apartment one evening, city lights glittering below, I whispered to myself, "This isn't the end. It's the beginning." Have you ever stood in the shadow of someone else's spotlight, told you weren't enough, pushed aside so another could shine? Have you carried the weight of favoritism, betrayal, or control so heavy it nearly broke you? If you have, then you already know. The real victory isn't in proving them wrong, it's in proving yourself right. I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments. Tell me how you rose above, or how you're still fighting. This space isn't just about me, it's about all of us who have clawed our way out of silence. Remember this: worth isn't something they give you, it's something you claim for yourself.